at the Morton Shear Farm, and we also have a weather station here. It's one of our NDON stations, North Dakota Agricultural Weather Network stations. This one is one of our towers. We do not have all of our stations outfitted this way, but we have several stations like this. Here in Morton, we have 4 temperature sensors instead of 1. That way we're able to measure inversions at different temperatures at different heights here. We also have soil moisture probes in place at this station at 4 different depths. Down to about 40 inches, so we can measure how much moisture content is in the soils here. We also have deep soil probes in place, so we can measure, especially in the winter, where that frost layer actually is. Our sensors go down to about 7.5 feet, but we also measure the traditional wind speeds here. Temperatures at about 1.5 meters, 5 feet, which is pretty traditional. Temperature probe here that we have at all stations. Plus we have a device that actually measures solar radiation. As I oftentimes tell farmers and my meetings that I go to, is we sometimes forget the most important thing in agriculture is not temperature or moisture, it's actually the sun. Of course, with photosynthesis, so we measure that at this station as well.
It's always great to see what Daryl's doing. He is a busy guy. So welcome, Daryl, this morning to the recertification that we're doing. We're glad to have you here. I'm going to start right off the bat with a question for you because we have about 15 minutes. And you know how you've got these NDON stations all over the place through North Dakota, Minnesota, and Montana. And I've seen the towers out there. You have some at my research sites. And how can these stations help applicators when it comes to making decisions on spraying? And I think we probably have a slide for you too for that, but let's get you started with how these towers and stations can help.
Well, we have 161 stations now, so we have grown quite a bit, even from the map that you showed on that little video that I did with you a couple of years ago. We have inversion sensors in the sense of really what we're doing is they're just temperature sensors. At all of our stations, including the stations in Steele County, we have 3 sensors in place. The traditional one, when you go on our website, it'll just tell you what the temperature is. That's at about 5 feet, but we have sensors near 10 feet and 3 feet as well. And so in turn, at that low level temperatures, we can determine what the temperatures are. And inversions, again, as a reminder, is this: when things are inverted, we always think as you go up, it cools down, but inversions are the opposite. So that 3 meter or 10 foot temperature sensor would be warmer than the sensor down at 1 meter. So when you're spraying, in turn, you will know that an inversion is in place. As most of you know, the label will state you cannot spray this when there's an inversion in place. So we give you that opportunity at all of our stations to know when an inversion is actually happening. This is our Inversion app, and as far as I know, it's still very unique. You can find other inversion apps, but they're based on algorithms. Ours are based on real-time actual data. And so you go into the app, and if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that it says alerts. If you go there, you can select any of our stations that you want alerts for. You can select the station closest to you. You can select the stations, 2 or 3 stations that are surrounding you. And when an inversion first is detected, usually late afternoon or evening, it will actually send you a notification that there's an inversion at X station. If you just go to the app, it will show green or a little green check mark. If you're colorblind, that there is no inversion, it will give you that little warning exclamation point or turn red when there's an inversion in place. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. And of course, that information is also available on our main website.
In the evening time, I'll get questions, Angie, we see this dust lingering in the air. Is that a sign of a temperature inversion? And if it is, can you explain to us what's happening and why is that occurring?
Sometimes that dust in the air is actually a little bit of a haze. And what's happening there is once we get to the evening, and really usually the peak time of the day where the inversions are the strongest, tend to be approximately 1 hour before sunset. So in June, when a lot of folks are spraying dicamba, that would mean about 8:30 in the evening, because that's the time of year when our sunset's near 9:30. But that haze sometimes you're seeing in the air is dust from gravel roads and such, but it's also the moisture level is starting to increase. So it's really in some ways a very light fog as well, because what's happening is the lowest levels of the atmosphere are cooling down. And when you cool down to that dew point. Of course, you're still getting a little bit of evaporation from the crops. So that haze, granted, is dust, but it's oftentimes just a little bit of a way of saying some very light fog is beginning to develop because, again, the temperatures near the surface are cooling down closer to the dew point.
Okay, and what time of day do these typically happen, Daryl, or most commonly occur? And when are the strongest inversions?
The strongest inversions, again, we have many years of records now. The strongest inversions tend to occur very close to 1 hour before sunset, whenever that is. And again, in June, that would be approximately 8:30. Inversions, a lot of people will call me and go, wow, I got an inversion alert at 5:30 in the afternoon, Daryl, this must be wrong. And I go, no, that's the time of day. The sun is beginning to set. The ground starts to cool off pretty rapidly. And so inversions oftentimes will start 3, maybe 4 hours, but I always use 3 hours as a general rule before sunset. They peak about an hour to 45 minutes before sunset. And then after sunset, you would think they would get stronger. They actually generally, not always, there's no always in weather, but generally speaking, they will still be an inversion, but they won't be quite as intense. And then as we approach sunrise, they usually go away pretty quickly after the sun goes up.
Okay, that's good to know. So we can already kind of anticipate when we may be able to spray or not spray based on kind of those generalizations. And I want to ask Angie, we brought up that map in Daryl's video that had where the end-on stations were located. And like Daryl said, there's a cajillion of them. I don't remember the exact number, but there's a lot of them. And does Steele County have any end-on stations, and where are they? And how accurate is the rainfall measurement on those? Which if it's associated with Daryl, I know it's going to be very accurate. And so can you tell us a little bit more about end-on stations in your area?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am really proud to say that Steele County, we actually have 2 end-on station sites, one at Finley and one at Hope. And so I get questions and kind of some banter, to be quite truthful, constantly in regards to, well, there's no way that rainfall measurement can be right. And there's the end-on stations, they're set to go at about, and Daryl, correct me, what's the radius that those end-on stations cover when it comes to everything but rain, really?
Through a lot of research, again, besides rain, as we all know, across the road from any rain gauge could be an inch different. I mean, we all have seen it. This side of the road, that field gets a downpour, your other field gets completely missed. But outside of rainfall, through a lot of research, it's generally a 15 to 20 mile circle around each of our station. Say the relative humidity, the wind speeds, solar radiation, a lot of what's our crop guidance tools are based on is accurate in those circles. So it's really been my goal since I took over NDON is to make sure every square inch in North Dakota is within 20 miles of an NDON station. And we're getting close. Eastern North Dakota, generally everybody is. There's still some parts of central and western North Dakota that we're working on.
Yeah, and I can tell you every square inch of Steele County, like you said, is definitely included in that radius that you mentioned. And so, like you had said, yes, rainfall amounts can definitely vary from your neighbor across the road, but I can't stress enough, especially when it comes to making those spray determinations, is checking out your local end-on station to get your temperature, wind speed, and even temperature inversion alerts. And so that's where that app can come in really, really handy. And one of the questions in the chat box, and this gets to kind of be the weatherman, getting back to your weatherman days, Daryl. So one of the questions was, when will our first inch of rain be here? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I always remind people that we don't average hardly any precipitation this time of year. Our average coming up here now in March, pretty soon. Generally, most of Eastern North Dakota is just an inch and a quarter. And oddly, that's the same average in April. The average precipitation in March and April do not increase much. May is what I like to describe as when our rainy season starts. So we only average about an inch in April. Can you get an inch in rain in April? Of course you can. But statistically speaking, more often than not, if you want to get a good solid inch of rain, it usually does not occur until May most years. Again, there's no definites in weather. There's always exceptions, but that's when the average time frame for that to occur in our area is.
Are there any things that we missed that you want to really emphasize or go through again?
Well, I will say that we do not have soil moisture data in Steele County. That's something that we're working on. Of course, everything costs money, but we do have a lot of sites nearby Steele County that have soil moisture probes. Really one of Abby's stations in many ways, if I can say that, up in Logan Center, not too far north of the border, has them. And so does Pekin and some other sites. But besides the things we talked about, NDON's also working on getting soil moisture and deep soil temperature probes around the state. And you will find some of that information in our state. And hopefully, if not in 2021, hopefully in 2022, we can get at least Findlay or Hope, one of those two sites, with soil moisture data. So we have some localized for all the Steele County folks as well. But I just wanted to point that out, that not only are we above ground network, we are a below ground network as well.
I like that appreciation for soil health and soil moisture and temperature. Thanks, Daryl.